Hello and welcome to Girls Anachronism. I'm Kate Wood.
And I'm Caitlin Flynn.
And we are your guide to costume history through television, movies, and other media.
Yay!
So last week we talked about Downton Abbey, which we adored. The costumes were amazing.
Yes, they were.
And this week we're going to go in a completely other direction and talk about a show whose costumes... I don't know, Kitty, do you want to...
Jesus. His costumes are, as I put on my Facebook page, costume filth. They're great costumes. I'm not gonna lie. They're very pretty. But they... Not for a period historical show. They don't follow any sort of anything that even is remotely even close to what was actually worn during that time period. Now, I've only seen the first episode and part of the second one. I wasn't able to get to watch more of it. But what I did see of it was abysmal, to say the least.
I watched the first 3 episodes. And the third episode is when I would say that they got a little closer. Like, if they had started out where the third episode's costumes were, I would be a little bit more forgiving. But anyway, before we get into everything that they did wrong, this is based on true historical facts. True events that happened, although they base it very loosely.
Yes, very loose.
On what happened. So we'll start with, who is Mary, Queen of Scots? Well, her name was Mary Stuart, and she was the granddaughter of Margaret Tudor, who was King Henry VIII's sister. So if you've watched The Tudors, that this is where we're coming in that kind of historical fiction that we're watching now. This is the next generation. Mary was next in line to be the crown of England. Her contemporary was Elizabeth I. And, it created a tumultuous political atmosphere because Elizabeth was Protestant and Mary Stuart was Catholic. So if you believed that the crown should stay Catholic, then you really believed that Mary, Queen of Scots, was the rightful heir to the throne, and you thought that Elizabeth was a bastard child. And if you were for the new Church of England, then you were for Elizabeth.
Okay, so Mary became queen 6 days after her birth, when her father died. So that's pretty quick.
So
that's
she never really
real fast
got
turnaround
to know
there.
what it's like to not be queen.
Yeah, I mean, it was ruled by regents until she became of age. But other than that, yeah, she was always queen, or going to be.
Talk about pressure.
Yeah. So Mary was actually quite well spoken and really tall by 16th century standards. Even I would consider even today, because I'm only 5'3". Mary, her adult height was 5'11".
Right. Well, and that is still quite tall for a female. I'm 5'7", and
you're just above average. Average is 5'5".
Yeah, I'm barely above average.
And Frances appararily stuttered and was abnormally short.
Did not look as good as this TV Frances.
Did not look as pretty. I was about to say, did not look as nearly as pretty as him. I think that was the most enjoyable part of my watching of the first and second episodes, was his prettiness. Unfortunately, Henry II died in 1559 due to injuries in a joust accident. Right. Henry II died, and so 15-year-old Francis became the King of France with Mary at 16. as his queen consort. Yeah. But then, lo and behold, Frances dies in 1560, just a year later, of a middle ear infection.
Yeah, so they were barely
married for a year, and he dies of an ear infection, which led to an abscess in his brain.
Gross.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yes.
Mary was, of course, upset.
Yeah.
Her mother-in-law, Catherine de' Medici, who wasn't overly fond of her to begin with, became the regent for the late king's 10-year-old brother, Charles.
Right, who we see.
Who we do see.
Episode 2, going to meet a potential wife for Alliance. Yes. These were children engagements were broken and made all the time in the royal families, just to sort of uphold alliances. Mm-hmm. They didn't do contracts so much. They said, well, I'll trade you a child for armies. Yes. And so then after all of that, Mary returned back to Scotland. But we're not going to get so much into the later years because the show focuses on her early years. And I swear to God, if anyone comments, oh my God, spoilers for us saying that she does marry Francis, there's no spoilers. It's history. There's no spoilers.
It's history,
yeah,
guys.
If you want to know who Mary, Queen of Scots, ends up marrying, pick up a history book. I have looked through so many forums lately, reading up on kind of just the general reception of this show, just to see how other people watch it. And there are a surprising amount of people who'll go, oh my God, spoilers. Why'd you have to say that she marries Francis? And I just...
because it actually happened.
Yeah, I just want to beat those people with a history book. Just saying. Yeah. Another thing that they did get right in the show is that Mary, Queen of Scots, did travel with 4 minions, we'll call them. Except in real life, they were all named Mary. They have some really bizarre names for these girls. Lola.
Yeah, what was that?
Well, there's Lola, Kenna, Greer, and Eiley. And these are Scottish girls. These are supposed to be Scottish girls from Scotland who, first of all, they don't have Scottish accents in this show.
Nope.
Like, nobody has a Scottish accent in this show, and they're Scots. So that's infuriating. But Lola and Kenna, I have no words. Those names did not exist back then.
No.
Like, I looked up Lola trying to figure out when it came to surface, and it came from Spain. It came from Spain. It's a name that is short for a traditional Spanish name. And I think the earliest that it is seen is in the 1800s, when kind of the word Lolita was starting to come about. But anyway, sorry guys, right outside of my apartment, they decided to begin some weed eating, even though they just mowed the lawn yesterday. So, yay for that. So in addition to them having that she has 4 ladies in waiting, there's also Nostradamus, who was an advisor to Catherine, but he also did not look that good. He was kind of at the end of his life. He only lived until 1566, and where we're watching is in the 1550s. So kind of, the last decade or so of his life, and he did not look that great. But those are kind of the main characters, the main focus. Spoilers, Sebastian, the royal bastard or whatever, did not exist. Complete fiction. He's not a real person, so we're not even going to talk about him. Because, wow, the weed eating sounds louder. Sorry, guys. Alright, so let's get into the actual fashion history. We're looking at fashion in the period of 1515 to 1600. And Kate, sorry guys, I have my own special nickname for Caitlin. And anyway, so sometimes I revert back to that before I even realize it. So Caitlin, this is one of your favorite time periods.
It's all right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I love it. Oh my god. I can't even. So basically, the fashion from the 1550s to the 1600s, or 1600, especially in the Western European clothing, it's super opulent, heavier fabrics. They did have silks and everything else, but gotta remember, guys, this is England, Scotland. It's cold. It's wet. It rains all the time. Fog. No one's gonna want to wear cotton or silk until like the summer, which is short and still not that warm. And castles are drafty. People aren't gonna be wearing these light and flowy fabrics like they do in the film or the show. Like that just no.
Yeah, it still get. I mean.
Yeah, but it's still cold.
It still gets cold.
It snows there, and yeah, and so. Basically, the fashion, pretty heavier fabrics, like velvets, brocades, things like that. The fabrics were like contrasting fabrics, so like yellow and black was a big thing, blue and white, black and white, black and red, slashes, lots of embroidery. If you had the money, you were covered like head to toe with embroidery and jewel work, metal, lace and everything. Embroidery, applied trims, other forms of surface ornamentation, that was all very prominent. The silhouette was a little waist and like a wide conical skirt, like a cone-shaped skirt, not round, not like the Civil War era. That's later. That's more dome-shaped. This is more of a cone shape. Like coming right out of the waistline.
So, I would say in the actual show, they have almost none of the correct silhouette. If they were to have gotten anything right, I would say they have use of velveteen, which we can tell that it's velveteen to us, but it gives the look of velvet. But they use velveteen, they use brocade, they use embellishments, and it gives a nod to the era. A very short, curt nod, if you will. But a nod nonetheless, much like the British accents that everyone has, give a nod to it being somewhere in Europe. So this show is all about just looking towards what things are supposed to be and saying, I see that. Now I go this way.
I see that, but I think I'll go in a completely different direction with that.
As far as the fabric, velvet is associated with nobility, especially back then. Velvet was introduced to Baghdad during the rule of Harun al-Rashid by Kashmiri merchants, and to Al-Andalus by Zirab in the Mamluk era. Sorry, tongue-tied. Cairo was the world's largest producer of velvet. And Cairo is pretty close, just right across the Mediterranean, so most of it was exported to Venice. And so it would make sense that France would have at least some amounts of velvet, because Venice and Italy are just right there, and they did a lot of trading and negotiations, so, then they would also get their velvet. Do you want to tackle brocade?
Yeah.
I have that little...
Brocade is dating back to, the Middle Ages, when trade with China first started to happen, Silk Road and all. It was one of the few luxury fabrics that was worn by nobility throughout China, Greece, Japan, Korea, and Byzantium. Brocades were also important during the Renaissance, more notably the Italian Renaissance. If you've seen other shows that feature the Italian Renaissance, there's a lot of brocades.
Yeah.
Wool and silk were primary fabrics used by Europeans during the Renaissance. And despite the lack of documentary evidence, it's said that due to the increase in complexity of the decoration of Italian silk fabrics of the 15th century, there must have been improvements in silk weaving looms around the time.
Mm-hmm. They definitely, their fabric definitely gets better. You occasionally see these older garments preserved, and when I look at them, all I can imagine is they didn't have machines like we do now, and I'm just in awe.
Of the amount of time it took to even just make the fabric alone. Mm-hmm. We have automated machines that just do that. It was all hand woven on a loom. It's insane. It's mind boggling to look at all the embroidery and think, wow, someone spent a lot of time trying to make this outfit.
Yeah, well, and Italy was kind of leading the luxurious fabrics as far as Europe. Mm-hmm. They were trading a lot with the East, and they were very close to Egypt and North Africa. They were close to Turkey and the Persian Empire. So they were really in a great area for all of this commerce and trade. And so as things were getting out of techniques being done in China, Italy was one of the first places that would have it. Their nobles were always looking fine, and it was up to the rest of Europe to just kind of keep up.
Yeah.
So you do see some Italian influence in the show.
A bit.
Yeah, I don't, although I see more of the Italian influence than actual French fashion of that time period.
Weird, or even Spanish, because Spanish during that time,
yes,
Spanish court was
a big deal. I see a lot of
deal.
Spanish in the show too. I just don't see a whole lot of the French court, which I don't know. The French court had its own nifty things going on, but they decided not to really do that. Another thing that we see in the show is lace. They do incorporate a fair amount of lace, and I even noticed bobbin lace, which was a new thing back then. So the nobles really had a decent amount of it because it was the newest lace. Because it started in the 16th century. Mm-hmm. And bobbin lace is a lace textile made by braiding and twisting links of thread, which are wound on bobbins to manage them. So you would have, 16 bobbins or something, and you're just trying to keep them all straight as you make this lace.
Yeah.
And the bobbin technique kind of made it easier to go elaborate. And it was easier to learn than the cut work lace that was especially used in the 16th century. So that's kind of the textiles of the age. That's kind of what they get right. As far as the actual show, let's just jump right in. Here's the thing. Mary is not wearing a corset.
No, she's not. I haven't seen any of the women wearing one at all.
Yes. At least in the first 2 episodes. There's one outfit in the 3rd episode where it looks like she may be wearing them, but she's definitely not wearing it over a chemise. I never see any chemise or anything, which, here's the thing, you have to wear underwear back then. People were dirty. They weren't bathing all the time, and you would not wear those delicate, amazing gowns straight on your skin. Mm-mm. Because that would ruin them, destroy them, cover them in dirt and filth. So you wore underwear so that you would have a layer between those beautiful garments and your dirty freaking skin.
Yeah, and the undergarments were easier to clean. Those were usually,
Yes.
those were made out of linen or cotton because you could
those
wash
would
that.
get washed.
but you couldn't wash your silk or brocade or velvet gown.
Mary's also displaying her cleavage.
Yeah, the neckline on those dresses is not accurate.
Which I feel like is a common misconception of that period.
Common.
People often think that there is a lot of cleavage because they're wearing corsets. Corsets do not equal cleavage.
No, they don't.
Can we just make that a phrase? Corsets do not equal cleavage. Like, repeat that to yourselves every time you get ready for a Renaissance fair.
Yeah, basically, the corsets, or bodies as they're called, were meant to flatten the chest. That was a thing, to have a flatter chest. If you were more buxom, that was considered lower class, to have very, very large breasts. It wasn't a thing. They wanted a flatter, more boyish chest, and the neckline is actually rounded, not straight across or even tilted down at all. It's actually rounded over the chest, so you can't even see the cleavage. It just flattens and then has this open chest piece.
You maybe see like a little line,
like a little
where
bit,
the boobs
but not
divide.
much. Yeah.
They are also very clearly not wearing a farthingale.
Oh nope, didn't see any of that.
Yes. Do you want to explain what a farthingale is?
A farthingale is like it's, to me, I always categorize it as the precursor to the hoop skirt.
Yes.
It's wood or whalebone hoops that the ladies would wear under their skirts to create that conical shape we're looking for. Mm-hmm. They would also wear, if you had more money, like a bum roll, as we call it. It's just a little pad that goes over the farthingale, just to give it that little extra bounce right at the top there, right where the waist comes out.
Men have always liked it when babies got back.
Yeah, always. Men always want the babies, yeah.
The boobs may be squished down, but the butt has always been...
It's gotta be there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and like the French court, like not necessarily right in this era, but they lead into having kind of the most iconic farthingale that goes way out, and that's more Marie Antoinette. But to have not even a little bit of farthingale just doesn't make sense, because as fashion progresses, you really get that iconic French fashion that was so talked about. Even now, today, we still talk about the fashion in French. Well, this is when it started up. And so if you don't show, the foundation being laid, then you aren't instilling appreciation. She is also, she's wearing a floral headband, at least in the first episode.
She wears it. There's a couple instances where I see floral headbands in the second episode too, as well, that I saw.
And that's kind of on point, because it was stylish to wear jeweled or floral headbands, which started because of the syphilis outbreak in Europe during the Middle Ages. Initially, women were wearing those to detract from the skin issues that came with full-blown syphilis. And yeah, flowers were just kind of a cure-all back in the Middle Ages. You got, your Black Death, here's a pocket full of posies. Got syphilis, put some flowers on your head.
Just distractions. You don't see that I'm sick.
Yes. But her hair is always down.
Always down. And I get that she's unmarried, and when you were an unmarried lady, yes, you could wear it down, but not for any formal occasion.
Not all the time.
No, yeah. Not all the time.
Because she's also, she's unmarried, but she's also the queen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she would be a little bit more formal than, maybe her ladies in waiting or anything like that. But one of the biggest things that I see just constantly throughout is that Mary
is sleeveless.
She's sleeveless, and she would never, ever, ever wear sheer material on her dress.
Yeah, no.
No lady in France in 1557 would ever wear sheer material unless it was to be worn as a cape.
a cape,
and that's it.
Yeah, or it was part of like your silk chemise or something like that. A piece of it could be sheer, but it was not like
Not an entire neckline.
not an entire neckline at all.
No, not an entire neckline with a sweetheart,
No.
No, that did not exist back then. That is a little bit more or 1940s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so she would also never be sleeveless. One of the outfits in the third episode, they have the higher neck, but it's sleeveless. But then there's like this like weird from the upper arm down to her hands kind of thing.
Ugh.
So I'm like, you guys were so close. Why did you cut her sleeves off and just drop them on her arm? Why didn't you just keep them connected? Yeah, so they got a little closer. Another thing is, she wouldn't have ever worn a drop waistline.
That waistline was at your natural waist. That's where it was. It didn't start to drop until they gave the appearance of a little lower waistline in the 1600s, but not quite to the point where they're looking at it. They have it at like a 1920s length.
Yeah, they have
like
it
that
like down
low.
to your hips.
Way down to the hips. Like
and a dropped waistline kind of popped up in Venice for a little while, but nobody else in Europe liked it.
Yeah.
Nobody else in Europe wore it. And if you did have a dropped waistline, it was only done with a square neckline. It would never have been a dropped waistline with a sleeveless dress or a round neck or anything like that. It was only you drop your waist a little bit and you have a square neckline. That is it.
That's it.
And the strapless dresses again weren't popular until the 1940s, but despite all of this, I think the biggest sin that this show has committed were regular pants with a zipper, a fly front zipper, belt loops, and just a regular belt looped through them.
Yeah.
And that's the very first time you see Prince Francis.
Yeah.
That's the very first time you see him, and he's wearing this atrocity. Like, okay, guys.
And his doublet was open. Like, he's flashing his queen. Like, what?
Yes. I would have forgiven them for the pants if they were, like, laced up with some, like, leather.
Yeah.
Barely. Like, that still would have annoyed me. I still would have been like, really? But a fly front zipper...
No, I'm sorry. No.
A zipper.
Zippers weren't
Didn't even exist until the 20th century.
Yeah. The early 20th century. Like, that's how long it took to create the zipper. And
yeah, it's like, you're a good 400 years early on that.
Yeah.
But here's what they were thinking, and we all know this is what they were thinking. Yeah, well, they were tight. They're tight.
They're tight.
They're tight.
Girls won't, no one will pay attention to the zipper. They're tight and he's pretty. They're not going to be looking at his crotch.
Wrong. We totally just stared at his crotch. Gosh, yeah, that to me, within the first 15 minutes or so of the show, I see that, and I really just wanted to be like, done. They can't even bother to make pants that don't have a fly front zipper.
Or even try to hide the fact that maybe it has a zipper. Or
hide it, yeah. They didn't even, which in that era would have been really easy to do. Just slap a codpiece on them.
Yep.
I have not seen a single codpiece.
I have not seen a single codpiece. Maybe that's censoring. Is it too phallic? I don't know. But
I mean, they should at least give the hypersexualized king a codpiece.
Yeah. Like, that makes sense.
Because that would be kind of humorous and stuff. Like, there he is with a codpiece. But
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen a single cod piece. And then the other thing that strikes me so funny about this show is that the extras are a little closer to being in period than the main characters.
Yes, a little bit, not much, but a little bit.
Yeah.
Though I did see a couple women. I don't think Kate noticed this in the scene where this is like the first or second episode where the Elizabeth is getting married and they go to the to consummate their marriage.
Oh yeah.
And she's getting undressed. Her ladies in waiting are literally, and I am not kidding, in 18th century gowns. I saw a Watteau back.
Yes.
In baby blue with pink bows on the front of this Watteau backed gown. I'm sorry. I'm done. Really?
Yes.
You can't even keep your modern it consistent with this kind of modern interpretation. No, you had to go and grab other time periods and put them in.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, and I think we'll make this clear to our listeners right now. It's not that we think that everything needs to be accurate.
Yeah.
We recognize the need to appeal to your audience and the need to design within certain confines. In fact, that was what a lot of our education was putting limits on us and telling us, here's your thing, but you have to design it like this, because that's what directors are good at. They're good at, putting their vision on it and limits. And so as a designer, we don't always get to do what we think is best. But if you are going to decide that this show is going to be modern clothes with a 16th century twist on them, then they all need to be
cohesive,
modern clothes with fly front zippers and sparkliness, sequins, but with a mild hint of 16th century. You cannot have completely modern clothes with a hint of 16th century with 1900s and 1800s sprinkled throughout, because it's jarring. Watching the show is very jarring. It does not flow together. I could forgive a lot of what they do with the main characters if the extras were also part of this cohesive design, but none of it feels cohesive. And I guess that's one of our biggest faults with this show, is not just the anachronisms, which there are aplenty.
Yes.
It's that the overall design, I don't think I've seen any other blogs talk about this. They just kind of rant and rave on the anachronisms, which, believe us, is easy to do. But it's just not a cohesive design.
It isn't. It's not cohesive at all.
And that to me is the biggest fault in this show. Going back, they do have some braids in their hair, drawing attention to their forehead, which was very popular.
Yeah, high forehead was the thing. Women would even pluck their hairlines a little bit to make it look even higher.
Yes, Tyra Banks would have been considered so sexy with her high forehead.
So sexy.
So yeah, that's kind of the fashion as of the show, and how it compares to the modern day. We do have a really great scene in the show where they are applying makeup.
Yeah, I did see that.
And I'm sure a lot of you guys, when you watched it, instantly thought, well, that can't be right. They didn't even have makeup back then or something. Actually, they really did. They wore makeup. In the Elizabethan era, having light hair, a pale complexion, red cheeks, and lips were considered the ideal standard of beauty. So women would normally wear some sort of pale powder to,
or
make
even
themselves,
or even a paint or a paste.
Yes.
Depending on how thick you wanted it. Let's see. Though it had lead in it, so it wasn't that great for your skin, but it would give you that desired very, very white skin look that was a sign of the wealthy upper class, because you didn't have to work in the fields, which meant tanning. You didn't tan. Only tan people worked in the fields because you had sunlight.
Yes, and for the red cheeks and lips, dyes were used, like vermilion or madder. They would apply those, although they didn't get quite the dewy, beautiful makeup lips that we see in the show. I believe one girl even has like kind of a purple.
It's almost a berry, yeah.
Yeah, like a berry tint to her lips, which would not have existed back then. And we also see them burning coal and applying kind of eyeliner, which they did use coal to darken their eyelashes and enhance the shape and appearance of their eyes. So they didn't get it quite right because we don't see them paling their faces. We do see them adding some color to their lips and cheeks and eyes, which happened then. It very much existed, and they would have done that. Just not to that degree, I guess.
No, all the girls are also... They look like they've gotten some sun. They look tan. They look like they went to the beach, which...
Yes. Especially, is it Kenna who's, like, having the affair with the king, I think?
Oh, the blonde one? Yeah, the one
the dark hair.
Oh, the darker... It's a lightish, whatever her name is. Yeah, her, especially. Yeah. She's very tan.
Yes, she's very tan. Very Spanish, Mediterranean looking. Mm-hmm. Not very Scottish looking at all.
No.
So we're going to be... This is actually becoming quite a long show. But to wrap it up, we're going to... And hopefully we'll do this with more episodes, especially ones that we find a lot of issues with the costuming. But it's going to be our section of what would you do differently? And so, Caitlin, keeping in mind the obvious desire to appeal to teen girls in that demographic and market, because they're clearly trying to sell the costumes. Mm-hmm. So keeping in mind that you want to eventually sell these costumes as ready-wear, how would you better design and honor the history and period while featuring modern ready-wear?
Oh, goodness. It's a tough one, but keeping more of the Renaissance motifs within the fabric, more than likely some of those brocades, velvets. The silhouette, yeah, I understand that probably not as ball gowny or conical, because no one wants to wear a hoop skirt now, but still keeping the waist higher, but yeah, doing away with some of the corsetry. I feel like I would have kept boning and the necklines more square to that rounded kind of way. Yeah, the use of sheer fabrics, like the sleeves maybe could be sheer but long, but the bodice of the dress and the skirt wouldn't be sheer at all, but still very pretty, of course. And the hair on these girls, yeah, I'd probably leave it down, but with more braids and more put together so that it would still look more modern cohesively, but still appeal to this teens demographic. And making it, a little bit more sexy, a little bit more form fit, but just, yeah, it's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah, I think for myself, what I would do is I instantly hated seeing any sort of sequins in the show. So I wouldn't have any of the sequins or I wouldn't have any of the sheer. I would really rely very heavily on the velveteen, brocade, and lace.
Yeah.
And I would do square necklines, and I would maybe do cap sleeves on the girls. I wouldn't ever do full sleeveless, but I would maybe do like a cap sleeve on a couple of dresses for like maybe maids, never for Mary. And I think I would mostly try to target anything that they wore as prom dresses or homecoming dresses or any other sort of special events. Another good thing that if they were wanting to sell some of these things is some of these dresses could look one way on the show, and then by using the same fabric and stuff, you could have a ready wear dress online, you know, at like CW's Rain Shop.com or whatever. So I would probably beg the producers to allow me to have what I would put on the show and then a shorter, cuter dress version
for
online.
every day. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is that I would stick with mostly heavier fabrics, winter kind of looking dresses, and stick with definitely the square neckline, which the square neckline was very popular in, was it the 90s, I want to say, wearing square. Because I know that I had a couple of square neckline dresses in the 90s. And so things always have a way of making a comeback. So square isn't necessarily fuddy-duddy. And I would definitely go with fuller skirts. Maybe not necessarily have a farthingale, but definitely the actresses would have some like petticoats or something to add body.
Yeah.
And a lot of lace. Like maybe for like a summery looking thing, I would do like a full long sleeve of lace. But I would never ever use sequins. I would use beads maybe.
Yeah, beading or glass. Glass
but
stonework.
But there are quite a few dresses that are very obviously little metallic sequins.
Ooh, yes.
But anyway, so that's what we would do differently. I think we would also agree to keep everything cohesive. If you're having your main characters dressed in one way, your extras should dress that way as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we're going to wrap this up. Any ideas on what we should do next week, Caitlin?
I don't know.
Well, I think I'm going to vote Borgias. Do you have a vote?
I'll take yay on that.
Right.
I will rewatch Borgias. Ooh, Cesare. And his sister.
Right. Excellent. So next week we will review the Borgias, which takes us into Italy, which we've mentioned a lot in this episode. So since we've already got you some introduction into the fabric, it will be even better next week because we can go into deeper details on stuff that we did not touch on this week. So in the meantime, my name is Kate Wood.
And I'm Caitlin Flynn.
And we will see you guys next time.
All right, bye.
Bye.